Hello everyone! It is time to dive into the next episode, episode 5. We are more than halfway through the series now, and this episode takes on a very important story, a very fateful meeting, as some would say, between Geralt and Yennefer. If you're just stumbling upon my videos, hello, my name is Magitech. I like to record a lot of Witcher videos. I'm doing a series right now where every week I go through each episode of season 1 of The Witcher Netflix. I talk about things from my perspective, what I liked in the show. I've read the books, I've played the games. So something that I haven't brought up in the beginning of any of my other videos, but I want to bring up moving forward. I will be discussing things that happen in the Netflix show, but I will also be discussing things that happen in the Witcher books. So, with that being said, if you're somebody who's only watched the show and has not read the books, some things that I discuss may be considered spoilers to you. I don't get super deep into the book story, but I sometimes mention things that might have happened in the books or things that maybe happened later in the books, and this could be considered a spoiler to some people. So I just want to bring that up before I dive into things, and in case you are somebody who's sensitive to those kind of spoilers, you may want to consider that before watching this video. But honestly, it's really not that bad, and don't be worried that I'm going to spoil the entire plot of The Witcher. I'm not going to. Now, let us dive into episode 5, Bottled Appetites.
But it'll cost you. Children are our favorite.
So before this episode gets into the big story, which is the Geralt, Yennefer, Last Wish story, we start with evil Nilfgaard and their subplot to get Ciri with a Doppler. I wasn't in love with this whole plot line, but I didn't absolutely hate it. I'm happy that they introduced a Doppler so early, because I actually do find the Dopplers in the Witcher universe to be very interesting characters. There is a story in Sword of Destiny that involves Dudu the Doppler, but that's not this at all. This is like a completely original thing that the showrunners have decided to add into the Netflix show. So hey, looks like Nilfgaard has captured Mousesack and put him in some dimeridium shackles, which is unfortunate. That means he can't use magic. And I gotta say, Fringilla is really looking to be quite a villainess in this show so far. I don't know if it'll be like this in later seasons. My current running theory is that in the next season and later on in the show, we're gonna get a little bit more of Nilfgaard and their story, and why they are the way they are in this show. So even this line right here by Fringilla, "The white flame made me who I am." She's talking about like the more religious part of Nilfgaard and why they're doing this. And I don't know, it's not something that I think is fully understood right now where we are in the show. And I think that means they'll be touching on it later in the show, later in the seasons. Season 1 really is all about the origin of the main characters, Geralt, Yen, Ciri, and their story. And this whole Nilfgaard plot is really a sub thing to all of the other stuff that's going on. So with that, I think later we'll finally get a little bit of what's going on with Nilfgaard and why they are just so evil, I guess is the word I want to say. And I don't think necessarily that they will be the super evil villain that they're being portrayed as so far. I think that we may get another side of things. But really, Fringilla is a very important character to Geralt way later on in the story, in the books. Fringilla is actually a very, very important character later on. And so I wonder how that may play out later on, if that's even going to be a thing. I feel like I don't understand enough of what the show is doing with Nilfgaard for me to justify why they're acting this way, why Fringilla is trying to work so hard to get Ciri, and why Cahir is also being very much a villain here. And unfortunately, in the beginning of this episode, Mousesack dies. And I was like, no! You can't kill Mousesack! How dare you! I don't know if Mousesack is dead. but he looks pretty dead here. I don't know if the show is going to 100% kill off Mousesack. Maybe something happens that will bring him back later on, aka plot armor. Or the show may take a different spin on how things are in the books and in the games. And maybe Mousesack will die in this universe, in this world of The Witcher. I don't know. I think from a plot standpoint, it kind of sucks that Mousesack died in the show, but I also think it might be kind of lame and super plot armory if he comes back somehow later on in the seasons. I'm not sure how they're going to do this, but it was kind of sad to see Mousesack die because he's a pretty likable character in this season. So on to the Last Wish story. Geralt and Jaskier, as always, have really, really great dialogue, though I will say Geralt is pretty harsh to Dandelion here, though he does, they definitely have this banter in the books, but this scene in particular, Geralt is pretty angry. It also starts a little bit differently in this show than in the books, and it is kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of random. So in the books, basically Geralt and Dandelion are fishing together, and that's where Dandelion comes across the djinn or the genie bottle. In this, Geralt is fishing just randomly. Dandelion or Jaskier stumbles upon him, and Geralt's being ultra grumpy and he can't sleep. Basically from the dialogue we gather that it's because of this whole issue with the law of surprise, and maybe Geralt has a lot on his mind because of it.
Oh, we are so having this conversation. Come on, Geralt, tell me, be honest. How's my singing?
It's like ordering a pie and finding it has no filling.
What? You need a nap.
I gotta say, that dialogue, though, that is really one of the most enjoyable parts of the show, let's be honest. So ultimately, even though Geralt is a total jerk to Jaskier, he still cares about him and still wants to help save his life, as this djinn just attacked him and took his voice away, which this is very much what happens in the story if you haven't read the book, which, by the way, I highly suggest everybody read The Last Wish. It's a really, really good story. Then again, I think I've said that about just about every short story thus far, but The Last Wish in particular is one of the most famous short stories in the entire series, so you should read it. And cue the amazing transformed Yen, who doesn't take shit from anyone anymore, including Tissaia. This is a scene that I actually really enjoyed because it does show a lot of Yennefer's character growth and how differently things are for her, how much things have changed, where now Tissaia is coming to her rather than her going to Tissaia when she was in Aretuza. Yennefer knows what she wants, and she doesn't have to answer to Tissaia anymore. And just the actress, Anya, the way she is here, I absolutely love it. Like, putting on her makeup, putting on her jewelry just like Yennefer would in the books, because Yennefer was all about her appearance. The dialogue that Yennefer has here is very much her character. This scene, for sure, after watching it, solidified for me that this Yennefer is a truly amazing Yen, in my opinion. Some may say she's a little bit softer than she was in the books, because Yen can be quite harsh in the books, and there's a lot of criticisms about Yennefer in the early books. Overall, I think Anya does a great job portraying how Yennefer is and her attitude towards certain things in life. And ultimately, yes, Yennefer does want a child, and she's clearly on a mission here. And when she wants something, she will do anything in her power to get it. And that's exactly how the character is.
The great Tissaia wants my help. What's the matter? Have you lost your touch?
Only you can be thrown a lifeline and think that you are saving me.
You're afraid I'll be everything you could never be.
And then enter the first meeting of Yennefer and Geralt, which I can't even show on the screen here because there's too many naked people. I think for everybody watching, even people who don't know the books that well, but you know that there's something between Geralt and Yennefer, and I think that the dynamic that the two actors had here, the chemistry, it was pretty palpable. You could feel something was coming on. Like you just knew something was coming here, and I think it was done really, really well. The bathtub Geralt and bathtub Yen scene was also great. I think in the Last Wish story, Yen was a little more forward, although she is pretty forward here, but she was a little more forward with what she wanted. Basically, this scene in the story is she uses her magic to go invisible in the tub, and basically is like washing herself all invisible, and Geralt is, you know, obviously watching this all happen and watching it transpire. It's a really cool scene. It's one that I really enjoyed reading, but I'm glad they at least included a whole bathtub Geralt and Yen scene in this, because I think it does add to that chemistry that's slowly but surely growing between the two before the big twist at the end happens. Also, this is where Geralt calls out that Yennefer is, or was, a hunchback. So one thing to note is that everything we've seen about Yennefer in the show so far did not exist in the books. It was created by the show. We know a little bit about Yen's backstory, but we don't know it to the degree that we've seen in the show. And the Last Wish story in the books is the first time we understand that Yennefer was a hunchback. And Geralt does notice this about her in the book. And he makes that observation and makes that connection. And he brings it up here in the show as well, where he says, oh, you know, telling by what you were, he was trying to figure out what deformity she may have previously had. So I think from here on, the rest of the Last Wish story is a little rushed, but obviously you can't fit everything that happens in the story in the show. There's only a 50-minute time slot that it can fill for each episode. But there is a lot that goes on in the story. Yennefer does end up tricking Geralt to try to get the djinn so she can summon it and get its power. Yennefer also does put the spell on Geralt that makes him do certain things in the town for her, and it's kind of an interesting whole little sub-story that goes on within the story. I think the whole Yen trying to get the djinn scene was pretty intense and was a lot, not fully how I had pictured it in my head, the way it was portrayed in the show, but it was quite intense. And it's a really, really important moment, because this is where Geralt gives his last wish. Geralt finally realizes that it's not Yaskar's wishes, it's his wishes, and he uses his last wish on Yennefer. And just like in this show, similar to the story, you don't actually hear what the wish is. So you as a viewer, you as a reader can try to figure it out for yourself what exactly the wish is based on what happens following. But I am one of the people who does believe that Geralt did wish for his and Yennefer's fates to be tied together. I don't necessarily think the wish was, I wish for Yennefer to be in love with me, or something like that. That's not what it is. He's saying that their fates are tied together so that she won't die doing this horrible thing. Basically, he sees Yennefer, he doesn't want her to die, and so instantly the thing that he thinks of wishing is, I wish for our fates to be tied together so that she doesn't die. I don't know if Geralt just really is not good at this whole fate thing, because now he's gonna have Yennefer's fate tied to him for the rest of his life. So whether that was an intentional thing or kind of just an accidental on the fly thing, I think is an interesting thing to kind of ponder on. Whether him making this wish was like super intentional, that he wanted Yennefer to be with him forever, or if it was kind of an accident where he's like, crap, let's be tied together forever type thing, and now he's kind of stuck with Yen. Like, he kind of feels he's stuck, not that he feels he's stuck with Ciri, but the whole Ciri thing happened in what we see to be kind of an ironic way. Geralt calls the law of surprise, and he does it kind of in an ironic sense, and now suddenly he has a law of surprise child, and now he's kind of trying to help Yennefer out, and he makes this wish about fates being tied together, and now Yen is going to be tied with him forever. So of all the love stories and romance that you can have in the world, I think Geralt and Yennefer have a very interesting romance and love story, because it is very much, are we tied together because we actually love each other, or are we tied together because Geralt just made some impromptu wish and it didn't actually really mean anything to him? And we see that in the next episode, which we'll get into later, how this upsets her and things like that. I have to say, one thing that I like about the show is there are certain scenes that happen in this show that are very much how I, almost not to a T, but very, very similar to how I pictured the story in my head when I was reading the book. And this scene in particular at the very end here is exactly how I pictured it to be, how it was in the books. And it just makes me happy when those moments happen. I don't know. I can't explain it. It's something that really brings me joy when I'm watching the show. And I'm like, yes, this is how it was in the books. And it's so great. And it makes me really genuinely excited. So the very final dialogue in the Last Wish story, the whole tower does fall on Geralt and Yennefer. And everybody in the town is like, are they dead? I think they're dead. And Dandelion, Jaskier, is on the outside really upset. He's like, oh no, my friend is dead. This is horrible. And the elf goes and looks in the window and he's like, no, they're not dead. And they're clearly doing something else. And this is exactly how it plays out in the show. It's a really great way to end the story, and I think the show did this ending so well, and it made me happy. So the last part of this episode is the Ciri story, which there's a lot of things to talk about. I think this is a very short scene. If you've read some of the complaints from other people out there, a lot of people agree that the Brokilon story was really not the best. I think this scene is really the major point of that is this Doppler Mousesack who just waltzes into Brokilon and is like, I'm here to get you, Ciri. And the Dryads don't do anything about it. They don't make him drink the waters of Brokilon. As they've said, everybody who enters must drink. They don't take him as a captive. They don't do anything really to try to stop him from taking Ciri. And I think that was a big misstep here because the Dryads are badasses and they really wouldn't let this happen, in my opinion. But it happens and it's like, we move on, we digress. Let's move on with this plot. And I think it could have been done better. Again, these episodes are only 50-minute long and there's only 8 of them, so there's only so much they can fit in to this story. And there is a lot of depth to these stories and to these characters in the books. So it's hard to bring that all into a show. I understand that. But I just think overall they could have just done things a little bit differently here. If they wanted to have this whole arc, I don't know. I just was really not a fan of it at all. And I probably could rant about it and talk about it for much longer, but I'm just going to leave it at that and say this didn't really... I wouldn't say a plot hole is the word I'm looking for. It just really didn't fit the story, and it just kind of happened, and everybody let it happen, and we moved on. It was just kind of like a rushed thing, in my opinion. And that's about everything I had to say about this episode. Like I said in a previous video, I think the middle part of the Netflix series was my favorite overall. So like episode 4, 5, 6, I found those to be the most enjoyable of the series, that I just happened to really like them. And so this episode included, I did like it. And as always, I love hearing your guys' thoughts on the show. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of episode 6. And I will see you all in the next video.